One of these sessions, you're going to come in and there's going to be like 4 lines of text for us to spend an hour on, but that is not today. I'm going for narrative arc and moral meaning and trying to have a deeper understanding of rabbinic literature as we go into this one today. So come on in, people, come sit. Okay, so one idea is come at 9:05 and schmooze for 10 minutes, and then we can start just at 9:15. Because the people online, I want to get them started. Okay, so welcome everybody. Hello, welcome back. Rabbi Panitz and I were talking about the class and realized that for a lot of people, a foundation in what Talmud is would be really helpful. How these different voices are compiled, what's the editorial process and the religious significance of the text, and we're aware of that. So we're thinking about where we will incorporate that session in the course of the coming days. For today, what I want to do is continue in the incredible text of Choni HaMe'agel, the story that we were looking at in Masechet Ta'anit, in Tractate Ta'anit from last week. If you weren't with us last week, that's okay. But you might want to go back and listen because it really is like a puzzle and we're putting the pieces together. This is complex and I am not certain that I have the answer here. I never really am certain that I have the answer, but here I'm going to be really looking to see what your take is on this because I have some outstanding questions as I wrestle with this text today. So I'm excited to look at this with you. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start by doing a very quick glance at the Mishnah. We're not going to read it closely. I'm raising it here so that I put it on the first page of our source sheet so that we would have a point of reference because what's essentially going to happen in the Talmud is the Talmud is going to share an alternative version of the story that appears in the Mishnah. And some of the details are added and some of the details are a little bit different. And I think that's quite significant. And so we don't have time to go in depth into both, but I'm going to point out to you as best I can where the text from the Talmud differs from the text that's in the Mishnah. Now, remember, the Mishnah is the core text. It is codified around the year 220 CE. The Talmud is a recording of conversations over the next 400 years after that, so between 200 and 600. And so it will often start with an issue or a law or a narrative that is spoken about in the Mishnah and then elaborate on it at great length. So what we're going to see now is the Bavli's version, the Babylonian Talmud's version of doing that, interestingly, by way of bringing what's called a Braita, which is an external text that didn't make it into the formal text, although they reference it all of the formal text of the Mishnah, though it's referenced often in the Talmud. That is being pulled from what may be the Yerushalmi's version of the story. I told you there are 2 Talmuds. There's the one in Babylonia, the Babylonian Talmud, there's the Jerusalem Talmud. So we're seeing a complex mixture, as we have over the last several courses, of threads of tradition and competing narratives in some way. And one of the things I want to ask us to think about is what's the story that the rabbis want to tell, and then which rabbis want to tell that story, and what's the other story that's also being told here. So if that sounds a little bit strange and obtuse, forgive me, and we'll get into it and you'll see what I mean. Before we go, we're looking mostly at the rainmaking part of the Choni story, whereas last week we looked at the sleeper narrative, the sleeper motif of Choni, the end of his life. So I want to just say a couple of essential elements of the way that rain functioned in the tradition for us to understand what's actually going on here. First of all, in Eretz Yisrael and in Bavel, in both places, rain was absolutely essential to their existence. But in Eretz Yisrael, in the land, if it did not rain, the people were it was catastrophic. And so rain looms large over their lives, and the absence of rain is perceived to be a sign of moral failing on the part of the people. And so there are all kinds of rituals that are prescribed by the tradition to address a drought And those rituals have to do with human beings changing their behavior so that hopefully we can awaken God's mercy and God will make the rain come. So there's prayer, there's fasting, there's morning rituals. Rabbi Panitz talked about 2 years ago in his Kol Nidre sermon in great depth. There's the blowing of the shofar. These are all things that the rabbis constructed as mechanisms to kind of awaken the people to their responsibility for their predicament and to awaken God to have mercy on the people so that they could be saved. Now, our story is going to take place just before Pesach, which means before Passover, which means that it is at the end of a long winter season in which it should have been raining. The earth should have been nourished and filled, but it didn't rain. And I want to just point out that some scholars say that it wasn't just one season without rain, but that actually this story takes place after 3 years without rain. So imagine the desperation that the people are experiencing when you are that dependent on rain in order to survive. Imagine if it's been one whole season or even 3 whole seasons without any rain. When they come to Pesach, that's the end of the rainy season. So this is kind of a last ditch. If it doesn't rain now, you know, the crops, everything will die. So this is kind of a last ditch effort. We're in the late Second Temple period at the time that this story unfolds. Okay, so actually what I'm going to do, I'll take us through very, very briefly, just the Mishnah and a quick gloss over the story of the Mishnah. So Choni, the people came to Choni and they said, pray that the rain should fall. He goes out and tells them, bring out your clay ovens, your Pesach ovens, and so that they don't dissolve in water, indicating what about his personality and his certainty that he will have the key to unlock the rain. He's extremely optimistic or confident or hubristic or arrogant, right? He goes and tells them to do that. They pray, he prays, but the rain doesn't come. He draws a circle on the ground. He stands inside it. He cries out to God. And then you might recall, because we went through this very, very quickly last time, and we'll go through it in greater depth, but in the Bavli's, in the Gemara's version of it in a moment, he asks for rain. A small amount of rain comes. He says, I want more rain than that. More rain comes, more rain again. And then there's basically flooding, and it's almost catastrophic in the other direction from abundance of rain. So he cries out to God that he wants God to stop the rain, something that you're not supposed to do. And in the end, the people get what they need. The rain stops, and the earth has been replenished. And the story ends, if you look at the bottom of the page, with Shimon ben Shetach, who was the Nasi, he was the leader of the sages at this time. Shimon ben Shetach says to Choni, if you weren't Choni, you should be ostracized for what you have done. Now, the word here is nidui, for ostracization. It's something that you've heard me talk about because I speak about the menudeh in my in the last chapter of the book, who's the person who walks in the opposite direction from everybody else. Along with the mourner, because that person has been ostracized. And ostracization it's one step short of excommunication. It's a really terrible punishment in the ancient world. So you're essentially relegated to a temporary state of excommunication in which for a limited period of time, you are not to really encounter the people. It's a terrible shame. It's like a busha to be ostracized, and it's very tenuous because you don't know if you're going to be able to come back or not. And here Shimon ben Shetach says to Choni, who just brought the rain, when the people were desperate because it's been either 1 or 3 years of drought, I would ostracize you right now if I could, except that I can't because you're like a spoiled child crying out to God, and God is doing your bidding, and so I'm not allowed to punish you the way that I want to. Pause. Okay, that's the basic gist of the Mishnaic version of this story. Are you ready? We're going to jump into the Talmud now. Okay? You're ready. Okay, good. So I want to just start this, and I'm not doing. I cut it a little bit for brevity, which you can laugh at because I think this is a 7-page source sheet. I cut out a couple things that weren't absolutely essential for us to see. So in text number 2, this is the Talmud responding to that Mishnah. We found in the days of Shimon ben Shetach, that Nasi of the Sanhedrin, that leader of the community, that rain invariably fell on Wednesday evenings and Shabbos evening. By the way, I hate when it rains on Erev Shabbat. I always feel like nobody's going to come to shul. But back then, people were home, so it was okay. It was like you're in the house anyway, it may as well rain. Until the wheat grew as large as kidneys, and the barley grew as big as olive pits, and the lentils grew as big as golden dinars. And so what they do, they took some of those massive magical crops, and they preserved them so that they could show future generations how good it is to be good with God, because look what happens when God loves you, and so how bad it is when you're sinners, because God's not going to give you fruits and vegetables like this. And the reason I share this piece and didn't just start straight with the Choni story is just to show you how deeply embedded the sense was in the rabbinic mindset that our behavior manifests in the natural world. And that when we're seeing a natural catastrophe or calamity, we have to hold up a mirror and look at our own behavior and see what we might have done to bring this on, which could be incredibly insensitive, right? Like you're blaming victims of the tsunami for a terrible tragedy that struck them. Or it could be read as incredibly prescient, that 2,000 years ago, the rabbis are saying when there are problems in the natural world, we need to look and identify what the human behavior is that contributed to those problems in the natural world and see where we need to shift course. So now the story begins. Choni is introduced, and what we're going to see is essentially the same story as what we saw in the Mishnah, but embellished. And now it should feel like an old, well-known tale, even if you heard of Choni for the first time last week, because I mentioned the story quickly last week, mentioned it again just now, and now we're going to go into it in greater depth. So an incident occurred in which the people sent to Choni. And this is the way that the version comes down in the Breita, in that external source. Once, most of Adar had already passed, but the rain still had not fallen. And so they sent for Choni, and they said, pray, and the rain will fall. And Choni does what they say. He prays, but no rain falls. He draws a circle in the ground. He stands inside the circle in the manner that the prophet Habakkuk did. As he said, I will stand upon my watch and set myself upon the tower. And Steinsaltz here reads in, Habakkuk fashioned a prison for himself where he sat. Based on this first passage, what is different from what we have already seen? There are a couple of really critical differences that I want to bring up here, because they're hints for us of what the rabbis are doing here. So something that's missing and something that's added in this version. About taken off the. That is different. But I want to say that. Okay, so what's added here is the prophet Habakkuk, and the fact that Choni is doing something that is not unprecedented. In fact, who has done this kind of thing before? A prophet has done this kind of thing before. And is it easy and beneficial, and this magic man walks into the circle and makes demands of God and God responds? Habakkuk fashioned a prison for himself in which he sat. Habakkuk said, like Choni, I'm not going to leave this place until you make it rain, meaning that there's some measure of personal sacrifice that he's willing to make in order to end the suffering of the people. That's very different from the Choni that we saw in the Mishnah, because remember what we said about the Pesach ovens. That's the piece that's not included here. And the Pesach ovens were the things that made us think that Choni was arrogant, that Choni was overconfident, that Choni was hubristic, right? So, yes, sir.
He also believed himself dear enough to God that God was not going to let him die.
That's great. That's great. So Choni's willing to make a sacrifice, but it's because he believes in God and believes that God's not going to abandon him. It's like, forgive me, It's like all of these people we're seeing on videos who are saying, I'm a U.S. citizen, I'm a U.S. citizen, because they believe that being a U.S. citizen is going to protect them from law enforcement because they're used to being in a country where there's a rule of law. So Choni is used to being in a relationship with God. He's been trained in a relationship with God in which God will respond. But he's also saying, I'm willing to sacrifice, to take the risk in order to end this catastrophic drought that is affecting the people. So we lose the arrogance and we gain the prophetic connection. That feels significant to me. We're starting to see a slightly different portrait of the person who comes before us today. So then Choni says to God, Master of the universe, your children have turned their faces toward me. I am like a Ben Bayit. I'm like a member of your house. You know what a Ben Bayit is? It's like the person who comes for Shabbos every week. Like they're, your friend who's not, like it was our friend Greg when we were in grad school, like our best friend, and David and I got married, but he came for, he was just like, he rolled in with us every week. He's a Ben Bayit. So Choni says to God, I'm like that to you. Like we're close enough that I can say to you now that the people really need this. So I am taking an oath by your name. I'm not going to move here until you have mercy upon your children. And at that moment, the rain began to trickle. And so that God is responding to Choni. I want to invite you to pay attention as we go through the text to the relationships between children and parents and see what's starting to emerge for you. So the rain starts to come. And then another addition to the story. The students approach Choni in his circle, and they say to him, we've seen that you can perform great wonders, but this rain is not enough to ensure that we're not going to die. It appears to us that a small amount of rain is falling only to enable you to get out of your oath so that you can leave this circle, whereas that amount of rain is not enough. It's like theatrical protest. You're there so that you can say that you were at the protest, but you're not actually willing to take the risks that are involved in really confronting the authorities, right? So that's new here. The students aren't appearing that way in the Mishnaic text. So Choni then responds saying, I didn't ask for this. I asked for real rain to fall, enough that would fill the cisterns and the ditches and the caves. And at that point, more rain began to fall furiously until each and every drop was as big as the mouth of a barrel. And that's a very big raindrop. And the sages estimated that no drop was less than a log in size. And the students said, you'd think that the students might be very pleased at this point, but the students come to him and say, Rabbi, we can see that you can call upon God to perform miracles and we won't die, but now it seems that the rain is coming enough that the whole world's going to be destroyed. So great, you've affirmed that you're a master, and now the whole world's going to die. So like we could have used without this kind of rain. I'm gonna ask you a couple big questions about this after we read just a little bit more. Choni then says to God in number 6, I didn't ask for this. I asked for a benevolent rain, a rain of blessings, a rain of generosity. Choni's reminding God who God is supposed to be. These are words that we use to describe God, right? And when Choni says this, the rains fall in the regular way, but they keep falling and falling and falling until all of the houses are flooded out anyway. So now it's not a miracle rain, it's just too much rain like we had here a couple weeks ago, and everything is flooding. And so the people have to leave all the residential areas of Jerusalem and they ascend to the Rabbi, to the Temple Mount, which is on the hill, at the top of the hill in Jerusalem. And there they say to him, Rabbi, just as you prayed that the rains should fall, so too pray that the rains should stop. And Choni responds saying, this is the tradition that I received. You can't pray over an excess of good. You can't ask God to stop the good from coming, right? So we say this all the time here colloquially, especially in the years of drought. When in California, when it would rain, we would always say, it's a bummer that it's raining, but you can't complain, right? Like we need the rain. so too there was a rabbinic tradition that when the rains come, don't kvetch about it, just be grateful. I'm going to pause the story here for just a moment. I want to ask what you make of Choni's conduct, his negotiation with God. Do you see this as a kind of like impertinent baby tantrum before God? I asked for this, not that. I need more of this. I need less of that. Or do you see it as an expression of holiness, a kind of sacred negotiation that he's engaging in? I'm curious what you think, Jeff.
I'm going to ask another question with that.
Okay.
If we're taking this literally, why would God want to flood everything out? Why would God want to do damage? If God's able to control it and have this conversation, why wouldn't he stop it at some point?
I mean, I think that is the most profound and hardest question. Like, if God loves us, why would God let anything bad happen to us?
But in this story, we're taking it almost literally,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, the story's asking us to imagine a God that loves us and is good and is still making people suffer, good people suffer. And I think it's the most important question that we can ask. I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, if God could stop cancer, why doesn't God stop cancer? You know, if God could stop war, why doesn't God stop war? And if God could make it rain, why doesn't God make it rain? And then stop the rain before people get hurt, why doesn't God? I think I'm gonna hold that question in humility instead of trying to answer it, okay? Thank you for raising it. Yeah, RBC.
I have this, I keep going to the Noah story.
Yeah.
And the flood. And what if Honi was actually there during that time? Could he have controlled that and our destination or where we're going in the stories?
Yeah.
Changed.
So was the flood able to occur and all of that death and destruction occur because Noach did not intercede on behalf of the people or did not have the power to? And by the way, they're both good, they're both real options because Noach never once, it says Kenasa. God says to Noach, go build this giant ark, I'm going to destroy the entire world. And Noach says, like, how big and how many windows, right? It's like without any word of protest. In a way, it's an interesting person to bring up in relationship to Choni. Also, their names are the inversion of one another, which feels like a Rabbi Panitz sermon, but like Noach and Choni are clearly, did you give that sermon once? You should. Okay, so did I just come up with that? I didn't read that anywhere. Thank you, Barbara. Maybe Barbara came up with it. It's interesting to hear, their names are the inversion of one another and their actions are the inversion of one another. And maybe had Noach actually stepped into a circle and said, I'm not moving from this place, then maybe that story would have turned out differently. Thank you, that's great. I love that. Yes?
Hi, so I keep going back to the students themselves.
Yeah.
And the responsibility, and I understand them asking the questions and stuff, but I keep wondering, what is their responsibility? Is the community putting all the responsibility on Honi's shoulders? Or just trying to do the best they can, and they're just asking, well, why are you doing it this way?
Yep.
Why are you doing it this way?
That's great.
Instead of thinking,
That's so great. Because the way we started is that the lack of rain was seen as a reflection of moral failing on the part of the human community. And what's happening here is that they're not taking responsibility, they're not fasting, they're not praying, they're yelling at Honi, they're rebuking Honi for not doing it exactly the way they want to. So they've relieved themselves of responsibility. Hold that seed for a moment, okay? Yes, did one of you have a comment, Scott?
Just reading this, I don't get a sense of love of God. There doesn't feel like any.
Okay.
In fact, it feels very mechanical.
Okay, so it feels to Scott as though Honi is, it's like, you know, Levi was sharing that he had a class on tefillah, on prayer. And the teacher expressed that if you really, really, really need something, you have to pray to Hashem and then you'll get the thing. And David said, that sounds less like Hashem and more like Amazon Prime, right? Like if you really do it the right way, you're gonna get exactly what you're asking for. And so there's something that feels transactional, right? There's a read of this that it feels transactional. I want this, not this. and God has to comply. And I want to just lift up the other side of this, which is thinking about Abraham arguing with God at Sodom and Gomorrah, which is not so different from this narrative. A long, extended back and forth between a human and God, where the human has a goal. The goal is ultimately justice and safety for the people. God seems to be on the other side of that. God's the one who's withholding the rain. God's the one who's giving too much rain. And the person is like, it's an intercession with God, a person interceding with God to try to get God to do something. So it could be read as transactional and diminishing of God, or it could be read as sacred defiance against a God that has failed the people, and the people are suffering, and God fails to hear the people's cries. I'm going to put forward both possibilities. Melissa, were you going to say so? Oh.
Before I was just going to say that I thought that perhaps God was reacting to Honi's arrogance and putting Honi
Okay.
in place a little bit.
That's great. That's great. So did everyone hear what Melissa said? That maybe God is reacting to Honi's arrogance. That God is like, oh, you think you're going to tell me what to do? Like, you're not the boss of me. And so I will suggest that I think that read more suits the Mishnah than the Talmud, because the Mishnah is the one that really puts Honi forward as an arrogant guy. Like, he's so overconfident. He's still confident here, but that element of arrogance is missing. And he strikes me as a more humble character in this retelling of the story. But maybe God is saying, don't forget that I control this world. Like, were you there when I tamed Leviathan? This is my domain, not yours. And putting Honi in his place. There's also like a very playful dynamic here between God and Honi, and this sort of, the playful negotiation is really, God is that attuned to Honi that when Honi says more, less, God is like, they're like dancing. They're really, we talked last week about how God and Honi are kind of chavruta. God's the chavruta that Honi can't find in this world. And there's something really delicate and beautiful also about their back and forth. Anyway, this part of the narrative ends with the people saying, the students are like, stop the rain, we're all gonna die. And Honi says, I wish I could, but I can't, because there is a longstanding rabbinic tradition that you cannot pray for the end of something that's good. Too much good in this world, it must stop, you can't. And then Honi goes on in number 7, and he says, Af al pi chen, nevertheless, haviu li par hoda'ah, bring me a bull for a Thanksgiving offering. Nevertheless, even though I'm not allowed to do this, because we have a longstanding tradition that we are not supposed to stop in excess of good, nevertheless, bring me a bull. They brought him a bull. He placed his hands on the head, and he says, God, your nation Israel, whom you brought out of Egypt, cannot bear either the excess of good or the excess of punishment. I know you're angry with them, and you withheld the rain, and they weren't able to bear it. And then you bestowed upon them too much good, and they're unable to bear it. May it be your will that the rain will stop. There will be relief to the world. Immediately at this moment, the wind blew, the clouds dispersed, the sun shone, and everyone went out to the fields, and they gathered truffles and mushrooms. When there are truffles on the menu and it says NP, you have to ask how much it costs before you order that fettuccine. The truffles are the rarest and most precious and of mushrooms, and so of delights that emerge from the earth. And so it all ends well, right? Somehow Honi is able again to awaken in God compassion, reason, and to teach us something about moderation, right? Extreme drought, we all die. Extreme rain, we all die. So guess what? The extremism will only lead to death. It's our responsibility and God's responsibility to identify a path of reasoned, principled moderation, and that path is the only way to human survival. That's like a pretty powerful moral message, I think, from this text, that Honi has to remind even God can get swept up. Like, if you're here and the whole world moves here, you think you want to move here in reaction, but don't. Because ultimately, only principled, intentional, reasonable moderation is how you stay alive, right? And how the world itself survives. I think that's like a pretty good message for us, a takeaway from this text. Janet.
I was wondering if this isn't the message of the guys writing the Talmud, in saying to us, pay attention and don't be like Honi with the praying and the begging and the negotiating and just accept moderation. Like, it seems like another message of the learning.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so that's why I asked us to think about what's added, what's taken away, and what is the storytelling that these rabbis are asking, or what is the story they're asking us to take away? I would say one of the first stories is about extremism and kind of the failure of extremism to hold the human community and keep us safe, right? Just interestingly, in light of all of the chaos and the incredible and very dangerous pace of advances in technology right now, this is exactly what Yuval Noah Harari argues throws people into the arms of strongmen. Because when there's chaos and confusion and vulnerability and fear, when millions, and now imagine in the next couple of years, billions of people lose their jobs, and climate devastation forces 1 billion people to become climate refugees, imagine what people are going the sense of vulnerability that they'll hold. And he argues that's exactly what throws people into the arms of extremist ideologies and strongmen. When we're unsettled, we look for answers, even if they're the wrong people holding the power and the wrong answers that they're delivering. Okay, so, but let's keep going to Janet's point. Now, Shimon ben Shetach here relays the following to Choni HaMe'agel. If you were not Choni, I would have put you into Nidui. For were these years like the years of Elijah, when the keys of rain were entrusted into Elijah's hand, and he swore it wouldn't rain, wouldn't the name of heaven have been desecrated by your hand in your oath not to leave the circle until it rained? Once you pronounce this oath, either yours or Elijah's must have been falsified. So Shimon, the first part of his statement is a little bit confusing, but I'll just say very quickly. First of all, I think he's saying, you've put yourself in the category of Elijah, another person who asked for rain, and you, Choni, are no Elijah. You are no prophet. You're just a guy. You're a magician. You're a holy man who happens to have this special connection to God. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe it's, I don't know, some inherited, luck. But you're no Elijah. But the second thing he's saying is Elijah asked God for political reasons to withhold the rain. And then here you come asking God for the rain. Had you been alive at the same time, you would be forcing God to negate a promise to one in order to fulfill a promise to the other. You're making God into a puppet. Amazon Prime, right? We don't want to turn God into that. We don't want to diminish God in that way. And I believe he's also saying, you're tying God's hands. You're making it so that God has no choice but to bring the rain. And that is not the God that we want to worship. And I mean, this is a thread that we've been sort of noting throughout this conversation. But I want to just suggest that this magic making of Choni is in some ways just kind of an extreme version of the prayers that the rabbinic authorities were proposing that people take on, and that the rabbinic authorities in my son's education are suggesting that he take on, perhaps, right? Like pray so that the rain will come, and pray so that, your football team makes it to the Super Bowl. Like, is that what we want in God? And so when the Eagles lose in the playoffs, which apparently happened, does that mean that my son did not pray hard enough? Because I guarantee you he did pray very hard for that. Like, doesn't Choni's extreme version of that kind of prayer just make the whole system seem silly, right? Like, does it make a mockery of the whole system? Shimon ben Shetach, I'm going to pause in a moment for your thoughts. But Shimon ben Shetach is going to go on and say, but what can I do? I wish I could put you in Nidui, but I cannot. Because you're nagging God, and God is doing your bidding like a child who nags his father, and the father does whatever he says, and the son says, Dad, take me to be bathed in hot water. Wash me with cold water. Give me nuts and almonds and peaches and pomegranates. And the father's like, okay. And then he quotes a verse from Proverbs, your father and your mother will be glad, and she who bore you will rejoice. So it ends similarly to how the Mishnah ends. Shimon ben Shetach is really fed up, but I am curious what you think at this moment, and we'll take a couple minutes for this. What is at the heart of the conflict between Shimon ben Shetach and Choni? Why do the rabbis struggle so much with charismatic, holy men, magic makers like Choni, with whom they are holding, in one scholar said, it's a perfect combination of grudging recognition and great unease. So we need what Choni's bringing, but we're not happy about it. So what do you think is actually at the heart of this tension? Scott started to hint at this, Janet started to hint at this. What do you think?
Feels like jealousy.
So yeah, it feels like they're trying in a post-destruction world to establish their own rabbinic authority. But we have these incredible stories of these magic men who just made things happen in ways that the rabbis couldn't, right? And so it feels like it's a threat to their rabbinic authority. Yeah, I think that's great. What else? What else is problematic with the Choni model? Do you have an idea, Marshall?
Yeah, I think it's back to this theme that you started from the very beginning, which is to what extent is our misfortune, are we responsible for our own misfortune?
Yeah.
And so, in this case, it feels like the rabbis are saying the people need to repent or to fix this problem.
Yeah.
And Choni's saying, no, I can fix it. We don't need the people.
Yes.
If Choni can fix it without needing the people, that undermines the rabbi's authority. And the rabbis are grabbing it back by saying, no, the people have to get it together with God for us to move forward.
It's great. It's like it's tangential. It's right at the edge of what Scott was saying. Choni both undermines rabbinic authority and communal responsibility. Because if there's someone who's magic and he alone can fix it, the people are completely disempowered, right? That's the end of the democratic process, if one person alone can fix it. And so they don't take responsibility. They don't make tshuva. They don't ask, what could I do wrong? They don't hold up a mirror and look at their behavior and think about fossil fuels. They're not having that conversation because they just need to find the strong man and have him solve the problem for them. And the rabbis are really concerned about that, both because it takes away their power, right? But also because it takes away the people's power. And the whole premise of the relationship is the people are in relationship with God too. And they need to do their work in order to help the people survive this. I also just I'm going to lift up a couple more unless people have a quick idea, just because our time is getting, what other ideas? Do we have any other sense? Yeah.
I just have a comment that now it looks like the rabbis won because we're relegated to asking for the dew and the rain until Passover.
Okay, that's great. So who wins? The rabbis win. We still follow their path. We don't draw circles in the ground and scream at God, right? Or beseech God. That's great. So they're the ones who wrote the book, so they get to decide how the story is told, right? Like the history is written by the victors. I want to suggest one other thing, which is that there's a problem with immediacy. The rabbis have a problem with immediacy that Choni is used to asking for rain and the rain comes, asking for more rain comes. That's not how the world works. Right? Like you don't get what you ask for immediately, or maybe ever in a way that you recognize that it's an answer to your prayers. And I think that Shimon ben Shetach, on behalf of the rabbinic establishment, is really concerned about creating a problem with immediacy that leaves us really vulnerable. And if you think about what we read last week about Choni and the way that he dies, he can't understand why an old man planting a tree that he will not see bear fruit makes sense in this world. And yet that's the only way that the world makes sense, is planting for the future. And part of it is because he's trained in immediacy. And I think the rabbis are they're really concerned about that. You can't think only about now. You have to be strategic. You have to think about the long term. What's going to be the impact of this action on the long-term engagement? And I think that they're rightly concerned about that as a people who spend much of our existence in exile. And exile, you don't get an immediate answer to. We sat in exile for 2,000 years, right? And held a dream. The dream that Choni couldn't imagine that people could hold it for 70, well, we held it for 2,000. But you don't hold a dream for 2,000 years if you think that all of your prayers need to be answered immediately or can be answered immediately. So that's another moral message from this text, right? About immediacy, about authority, about extremism. We're going to still keep, do you have an idea?
Oh, I'm struck by the father-son of it all.
Yeah, great.
Someone who has an 11-year-old daughter like myself, it's on my mind, but it strikes me that it's like this immediacy is very much the behavior of a child.
Yeah, that's great.
It's like my kids are like come to me, they're like, I'm bored, and that's my problem now. It could be that like this rabbinic period is like the adolescence, and their exile is the adolescence. And they're kind of grappling with that, needing to move into this phase of accepting the longer view and taking on responsibility for your own future.
That's so great. It made me remember something that my therapist once said to me many years ago, which is there's this precious moment where the relationship between parent and child shifts from Ima, I need you now, and you have to drop whatever you're doing and go help them, to Ima, I need you now, and you say, I'll be there in a moment, or you can come here, right? Like, because they're actually independent enough that they could come to you and ask you to help them with the thing, but like that's a transition where you have to go to them and they have to come to you. Thank you for raising the parent-child thing. By the way, thanks to Rabbi Panitz, who shared with me this wonderful book by Julia Watts-Belzer called Power, Ethics, and Ecology in Jewish Late Antiquity. And she does 2 chapters, actually, on this chapter of Ta'anit, one especially about Choni, which raises some of these interesting ideas about the dynamics between charismatic figures and rabbinic leadership. But I want to go back to this parent-child for a moment, because you might notice that Shimon ben Shetach calls him a child who's taunting or tantruming for his parents. What does Choni call himself to God? Did you catch this? We talked about it briefly. A ben bayit, which is a son of the house, but it's not a son, right? A ben bayit is, in a way, it's Greg. It's not Levi for me, right? Like it's like your good friend who's always around, but it's not your child. And so in a way, what Shimon ben Shetach is doing is actually making the relationship between Choni and God even more intimate than Choni himself is claiming. So what I want to suggest here, and this, by the way, I'm going to quote Isaiah ben Pazi, who's an Israeli scholar who wrote an article about this called Choni, the Circle Drawer, a member of the household or a son who implores his father. Because in a way, by degrading Choni and saying you're like a tantruming child, what he's actually doing is saying you're God's child. And who does Choni say is God's child? Did you catch this? Someone find it? I'm not going to give you this answer. Who does Choni say is God's child? It's so good. It's the people who are God's children. I did give you the answer. I said I wasn't going to. If you look in text 4, it says, Ribono shel olam, banecha, your children. So in a way, like what I want to suggest here, and I told you I don't know if this is right. I'm not certain. But what I want to suggest here is that the Choni that we're encountering in the Bavli's version is much more humble. He's not, the rabbis are calling him the child of God. He's calling the people the children of God, but himself like a guy. He's like a third wheel or something. Although I loved having Greg there, but like he's not the son. He's the extra person, right? He's in a way like holding this humility, and the world doesn't see him. The rabbinic students who come to him and challenge him when he's in that circle are so incredibly disrespectful to him. The comments that they make to him, you're doing this just so that you can get out of your oath, not because you actually care about the people. Like, here's this man. Just imagine for a moment that Honi is not the arrogant, like bloated ego of grab your ovens, they shall all be overwhelmed by what. But he's this deeply humble man who happens to have a special relationship with God and is willing to step into the circle, into the arena on behalf of the people. And they're like, you're only doing this to get out of your oath. Oh, now we know that you have magic, but you're willing to have the whole world destroyed just so that you can show the world how strong you are. There's something going on here in which I believe that the rabbis don't fundamentally understand who Honi is. They do not respect him, they do not understand him, and they never ask. And that becomes especially important for the last piece of our shiur today, which I'm going to bring you into in just one moment, because I forgot to mention to you, if you look at number 12 and 13, who else gets into a circle and cries out? Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses is praying for Miriam to be healed and says, Elna Rifanallah, please God heal her. And the rabbis in Avot Rabbi Natan, which we don't have time to look at right now, tell a story in which Moses himself draws a circle in the ground, stands in the middle of it and says, God, I'm not leaving this place until you heal my sister. So not only is Honi like Habakkuk, not only is he like this prophet, but he's also like Moses. And so I find myself softening to this man, right? That he's like a profoundly misunderstood person. That the rabbis don't get him right. That they tell a story about they tell the story in the way that we could get it right. But the story is a story of their own failure. Now, we're going to go very quickly into Abba Chilkiah. And the reason we're going to do it quickly is because we only have 10 minutes left, and also because if you've been around me, you've heard this story, because I love this story. Abba Chilkiah, this story comes right after the Honi story. Abba Chilkiah is Honi's grandchild, one of Honi's grandchildren, the son of his son. And the story is that when there was drought and the world was in need of rain, they would send the sages to Abba Chilkiah, and they would ask him to pray for mercy and pray for rain, and the rain would come. And it happened one time that the world was in need of rain, and the sages sent the rabbis sent a pair of rabbis in a delegation to him so that he would pray for mercy and the rain would fall. They went out to his house, but they couldn't find him there. They went to the field. They found him hoeing, interestingly, because there's a drought. And so imagine how hard the earth is. And here's Honi's grandson, Abba Chilkiah, who's just with the hoe trying to break ground in an infertile landscape. And they greet him, they say, Shalom, Shalom, he doesn't respond. Yavule Shlama, so he doesn't respond to them. They basically sit out there all day trying to get his attention. They can't get his attention. Towards evening comes, and he's gathering firewood, and he places the wood and the hoe on one shoulder, and the cloak that he's got, like his extra his cloak on the other shoulder. Super weird behavior. The entire way home, they're following home. They notice that he's not wearing shoes, but when he gets to the water, because he has to pass through a creek, he puts his shoes on, which is super weird because his shoes are going to get ruined in the water. They're going to get wet. When he gets to the shrubs and the thorns on his long journey home, he lifts up his pants. Why is that weird? He's going to get all cut up. His legs are going to get cut up. Everything he's doing is bizarre. Wait, why is it weird that he puts the heavy equipment here and the cloak here?
Because they want to destroy the cloak.
Well, this we learned, we don't know this yet, but what seems strange about it to the rabbis is, like if you're holding a heavy burden, you put you want to protect yourself. So you put the cloak down and then you put the heavy equipment, and he doesn't do that. He does the opposite. So he's tearing into his shoulder. His legs are cut up. His shoes are ruined. When he gets to the city, his wife comes out and she's adorned in finery. Super weird, especially because we think at this point, we get an image of a person who's probably very poor because he's out there working the infertile land, and he's walking to and from work, and all the things indicate that he's poor, but then she's got finery. gets to his house. His wife goes into the house first, and then he went in, and then the rabbis followed after him. That's super weird. Usually the wife would go behind the husband. Here he has the wife going in first. He gets in, he sits down, he eats a meal. He doesn't say anything to the sages. He doesn't invite them to eat. They're hungry, by the way, because they've been following this guy around all day, and he hasn't even greeted them yet. He seems incredibly rude, boorish, problematic character. Then they witness him dividing the bread between his children. He gives the elder one piece and the younger child 2 pieces. Like so many stories in the Torah, it's overturning the birth order and the privilege that goes to the firstborn. That's super weird. And he still hasn't said a word to the rabbis. Then, am I going too quickly? Okay. Then he says to his wife, we know why they're here. They're here because they need the rain. How do they know that? Because they also live in a place of drought. They know the rain hasn't come. They know why the rabbis are at their house. Seems like the rabbis don't visit them often, unless it's to ask for the rain. Let's go up to the roof and pray for mercy. Maybe God will give mercy. The 2 of them go up to the roof very quickly, and he stands on one corner of the roof. The wife stands on the other corner of the roof. They both start to cry out to God. The clouds form on the side where the wife is, and it starts to rain. They go downstairs, and they finally say the first words to the rabbis that they have said this entire day. And those words are, what are you doing here? And the rabbis say, we've been sent to you so that you should pray for rain. And he said, well, God has blessed us with rain. You didn't even need me. Look outside. It's pouring rain. And they say to him, we know that the rain came because of you. And I think this is the turning point in the story. It says, Ela lemalan mar, hane mile ditmialan. So, but let us ask you some questions about your behavior, which is puzzling to us. Those rabbis got to that place and got exactly what they came for. There's a calamity, the people are suffering, there's an extended drought. They go to this man, he is rude, he's disrespectful, he's weird, he's he's doing everything out of the ordinary, and it's raining. So why do they stay? Why don't they just leave and go home and say, you're not going to believe what happened with Abba Chilkiah today. That guy's nuts. But they don't do that. Instead, they say, we have to ask you a few questions. They go on to ask him about every single twist and turn of this narrative. You can read it later if you haven't seen it before. And for every strange behavior, he has an explanation, a justification. Why does he put why didn't he answer them? Because he's a day laborer. He's getting paid by the hour. He doesn't feel that he can justify schmoozing and socializing during work. He's actually being incredibly ethical in his workplace. Why does he put the heavy machinery on one side and the cloak on the other? Because he's so poor that he doesn't have his own cloak. He has to borrow a cloak, and he doesn't want it to get torn up by the machinery because he has to return it to his neighbor. Why does he lift up his clothes? Because his skin can heal, but his pants can't, and he only has one pair of pants. What we end up seeing through this narrative is the story of a person who is deeply misunderstood by the world. And what occurs to me, and what I will propose as we sort of bring this massive arc to a close, is that the reason that Abba Chilkiah and his wife live outside of town, like out at the periphery, at the outer edge, is because they saw the way the Choni was treated by this community. They saw that Choni was deeply misunderstood by the very people that he was trying to help, and they knew that they had the power to do the same thing that Choni did, but they didn't want to be in that arrangement. They do everything they can to say, like, it wasn't us. Why does Abba Chilkiah say it wasn't me? It's not just that he doesn't want the kavod. He doesn't want them coming again asking for help. Like, he knows this arrangement. It doesn't work for him and his wife. By the way, his wife is also a tzaddiket. She doesn't inherit the gene, but because she is so gracious and upright and just, we don't know exactly why, but she also has the power to bring the rain. In fact, even more directly than Abba Chilkiah does. But they don't want to be in relationship with the community that doesn't see them and doesn't understand them. And I want to just propose that moment when they say to him, but can we ask you some questions, Master, about some of your behavior that puzzled us? That is the turning point moment, not only in the Abba Chilkiah story, but also in the rabbinic and charismatic leader story. because what's happening here is that instead of making assumptions about a person, we'll take the benefit of his behavior, but we will begrudgingly take it because we're completely uneasy with the power that he has. That man is erratic and weird and different. Instead, they, for the first moment, actually ask a question. Think of the rabbis who are like, you're only doing this to get credit. Now you got credit and you don't care if the whole world is destroyed. Well, this version of the story has rabbis who say, I don't get it. Can you help me understand? And I want to suggest that that is the beginning of the healing process. And so I called this shiur after a night of wondering what the actual essence of this is, on wonders and wondering, because it's not just about the miracles that he's able to make happen. In some ways, the biggest miracle here is that those rabbis who were desperately in need of a miracle so that the people could be saved, they were operating from the place of trying to care for the community, actually realize that you can't take care of the community if you don't take care of the people in it. And Abba Chilkiah is in it, and Choni was in it, and where their predecessors failed, they will not fail. And at the end of this story, which we don't have really time to go into, the rabbis are asking, well, why did it start to rain? Like, one of the things they're curious about is, why did it start to rain on the side that your wife was on and not on your side? And he answers saying, basically, my wife is more righteous than I am. There's another issue of immediacy here that we could look into if we had more time. And what he does is he hyperlinks at the end of this long story to another very famous sugya in the Talmud from Masechet Brachot, a story of Rabbi Meir and his wife Brous. And he tells the exact same story, but there are these bad people who are tormenting Rabbi Meir. And Brous prays that they should, and Rabbi Meir prays that they should die, and Brous prays that they should make tshuva, that they should change. And he changes his prayer, and they do. And the last word is v'hadaru. They make tshuva, they return. And I just wanted to pull that out. Like, something happens here at the end of all of that in which tshuva is actually possible. And if you go back to the very beginning, as Marshall was indicating, this is fundamentally, the rains are fundamentally about awakening the people to look at ourselves and figure out, what could I do differently? What could I change? What did I do wrong here? And I want to end this story with tshuva. That thing that was denied to the people before is actually how, by the way, the story doesn't end here. It goes on. There's lots of magic makers and other grandchildren, but I'm ending the story here. I'm taking the rabbinic license to end the story here because I feel like this is an arc which is through our wonder and curiosity about each other, healing actually becomes possible. And asking someone, can you help me understand why you behave that way, is not a rebuke. It's an invitation to healing. And I think we need that now. They needed it then, and we need it now. And maybe in the spirit of these two unnamed sages who had the goodness in their heart not to go home to their wives after a long, weird day, but actually to stay and say, can you just help me a little bit understand this, that maybe for us too, healing might be possible. Thank you. I'm going to close us. I'm sorry that I keep running late. We'll see if Rabbi Panitz does a better job with timing than I did. I want to say that this learning today was dedicated in memory of Janet's beloved mother, Edith, who died when Janet was 11 years old. And I only wish she could see you as a grown-up, Janet. I think she would be so proud of you. So I'm going to invite us to Kaddish de Rabbanan. Is there anyone else who's saying Kaddish today? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Yitkadal v'yikadash shemei Rabba. B'alma divrach yiratei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayachon v'yomachon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. B'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevarach le'olam omei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudsha brichu. Le'ila min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechamata da'amiran ba'ama v'imru amen. Al Yisrael v'al Rabbanan v'al Talmidehon v'al kol Talmidehon v'al kol man da'askim be'oraita diva atra hadein v'diva chol atar v'atar Yehei lahonu lechon shlama rabachina v'chista v'rachamin v'chayin arichin u'mizonei revichei u'forkana min kadam avahundi v'shmaya v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'akol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Osei shalom b'ramav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'akol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Thank you, everybody. Next week.
Rabbi Brous?
Yes.
I just want to lift up one comment from the chat.
Yes.
Inquiring minds want to know, what happened to Greg? Did he remain a Kerma Ben Bayit? Or maybe did he marry and host Shabbat dinners of their own?
Yes.
Did RSP and David get invited on the regular? Alas, RSP and DL moved west. Did Greg follow? Obviously, we need the Mishnah of Greg.
I love this. Can I close with one story of Greg? First of all, he did get married, and they're very generous and host people for dinner in their house in New York every Shabbos. But also, when my father died, Greg Rosenberg got on a plane and flew to LA, where he was on the ground for 1 hour to come to Shiva, and then flew back home. That is my friend Greg Rosenberg. He was also one of our first donors to IKAR. He sent us $180 in the earliest days when Melissa and I were like, are we going to be able to turn on the lights in the JCC? And he's like, I just love that you're trying something new. I support it. So also in honor of Greg Rosenberg. Thank you.